Yeah, I just don't think it's humanly possible for enough new mines to come on stream in order to sort of bridge this gap.
Copper is the #1 market globally for metals that's facing the biggest shortages, production cliffs, and I think it's going to be the most robust performance over the next 50 years.
There are a lot of things that are uncertain about the transition to electric vehicles and the coming refurbishing of the electrical grid. One thing we do know is that we're going to need way more copper than we have right now. Unfortunately though, finding new copper has been extremely difficult over the last few decades, and that's why companies and governments around the world are scrambling to find copper deposits that are going to make a dent in this growing supply-demand imbalance. That's why we're talking to Sean and Ivan from Torque Resources. They're going to help us understand just how dire the situation is and why that makes copper exploration companies crucial to meeting this growing demand for copper. Why don't we start with the macro for the base metals market? What are the base metals that you guys are targeting here with Torque, and what is the macro backdrop for them?
We're targeting copper, and when I entered the business 20 years ago, copper was trading at 50 cents a pound. It's now trading at $4.20 a pound, on its way to make a record highs next year. If any of you have a laptop, an iPhone, are thinking of buying an electric car, renovating your house, or building a new house, you're going to consume a tremendous amount of copper. And we all know the population in the world has doubled in the last 30 years, and the demand for copper is skyrocketing because of the electrification of the planet. And the one thing no one's talking about is how few mines are being found. And the other thing people are not talking about is how long does it take to put a copper mine into production. It takes anywhere from 12 to 20 years, depending on the social environment of where the mine's being found. So, we like to say as great explorers, we're hunting for it in the right address, but all the easy mines have been found, and it's going to really be the tenacious explorers that have been at it for a long time that are going to come up with the big discoveries. So copper is the #1 market globally for metals that's facing the biggest shortages, production cliffs, and I think it's going to be the most robust performance over the next 50 years.
Can you put some numbers behind the demand that we're going to be seeing?
It's hard to quantify. I'll give you a specific fact. We all seen Teslas. We've seen electric cars. About 3% of the driving population of the world drives electric cars. If you double that to 6%, there's no copper left in any existing mine in the world right now. And so the projection for electric car saturation in our driving population globally is to be at about 7.8% in 2030, which is about 8 years away. So we have a big problem, a big shortage of copper. We've heard about it being discussed as a strategic metal. It is becoming that metal that everyone's using and nobody's finding.
And it seems to be also a narrative that is gaining some steam. And Goldman just came out with a report this week talking about the copper shortage. It seems like this is something you've had your eye on long before the rest of the market has been catching up.
It takes time to find these mines, and you always want to time your building of your portfolio of projects you're going to go look for, the metal you're going to go after, with the potential performance in the commodity. And the timing couldn't be better. And seeing Goldman say it, on the US side, that's one of many reports that have come out recently, but it's encouraging, and it fits our business model of going out and rewarding shareholders with a big copper discovery, amidst this record outlook for copper's price performance due to the shortages it's facing.
Okay, so the market is starting to recognize it, but also the government is starting to recognize some of the things that they need to push. Can you talk to me about the incentives for EVs, electrification, and some of the other infrastructure that is going to require all of this copper?
We've heard about this big green energy plan, the desire to renovate, the entire US in terms of building materials. Anytime that word is used, anytime someone talks about a greener or better building materials, they're going to use copper, not just for wiring, but they're also going to use it for pipes and for water, right? So we're looking at one of the biggest campaigns ever to come out of the US government and many other around the world to electrify and renovate or refurbish the entire planet so it burns cleaner. Anything that requires power requires copper. So I think it's just something that we're going to see as major incentives get initiated by the US government, Canadian governments, all governments globally are going to be pushing for it because we need cleaner air. We need to clean up this planet.
So you paint a pretty strong picture that demand is going to be rising, and you talk about how we're not finding the same deposits that we used to be finding. Is it possible to meet this on the supply side? How is that going to happen?
I don't think we're going to even come close, and I'll give you a statistic here. In the last 10 years, one copper mine of significance was found called Solaris, a company by the name of Solaris down in Ecuador. Outside of that project, there has been no consequential copper discoveries found. And again, to my other point, it takes 12 to 20 years to build these mines. So the rebuttal on copper is if the price goes high enough, all these low-grade copper mines will come online. And I absolutely agree. These are big capex, projects, $5 billion, $7 billion to build these mines. And what I'll say about that is if you build a low-grade copper mine, it's not going to supply as much copper as you want just because you built the mine. So we're going to face supply shortages and increasing demand for decades to come. And I like to think that, we finally turned the corner in green energy, and governments have taken a lot of initiative towards this. And so if you're looking at a commodity and you're wondering where is the real bull market coming in commodity cycle, what's going to lead it? I think copper takes center stage because we're all using it and we all need it and nobody's finding it.
Okay, and how do you think about re-engineering risk? Obviously, when you talk about a demand that can't be met, naturally it goes to thinking, how can we do this differently, maybe without copper? Is it just too integral? There is no replacement?
I've been asked this question in conferences in New York and other places, and people have suggested aluminum and different metals. It's not safe to use other metals to replace copper in wiring, and it's not efficient either. And then you're going to create another supply issue and a different commodity. But if they could have replaced copper, in a lot of places already, they would have, because the price is going up as you're seeing right now. So I don't think there's an easy fix. I don't think there's a solution. I don't think we want to drink out of any other pipes than copper pipes. And it's still the best conductor and transfer of power and most reasonably priced metal to use. I mean, gold is an amazing, you can make gold wires, but is a tremendous amount more expensive than copper right now. But no, there's no substitute for copper. Copper is number one.
Let's move on to torque then. How are you guys positioning yourself to take advantage of these trends?
Yeah, well, we have been scouring the planet, and we had been for a couple of years prior to honing in on Chile. But one of the great things about Chile is it's where a lot of the world's greatest copper mines are located. Anybody who's anybody has an address in Chile among the major mining companies, and it's been a long history of success, and they have a very well established mining industry, and that comes with all sorts of benefits, particularly that we're seeing here during a pandemic when we can't. We're not going into a jurisdiction where there is no mining professionals available and so forth. We're able to sort of operate our Chilean business unit from Vancouver. But, Chile it has the endowment for copper. It has the mining laws and the history. It has the opportunity to find additional large-scale deposits, which is precisely what we're targeting. And it has the local talent. And we have certainly benefited from being able to tap into all of those things.
Our goal with Torque is to make it the number one portfolio for world-class copper discoveries globally. And what I mean by that, our first project, Margarita, we are just learning about how prolific this could possibly be, if it could actually be a deposit or not, and we'll drill it later this year. But if we're successful, we're looking to give that 20 to 30 time return of your share price money. That's what we're looking for in our first project. Each project we acquire will have similar merits, some a little bit larger because of the scale of things we're getting onto. And we've hired a team.
The assets are what they are. They've been there. We have a cohesive team. The business has become extremely specialized since in the 30 years that I've been there. Before, people would wear 2 or 3 hats. Now you really need an expert in each discipline, and we have access to or on our team full time all the experts required to move things quickly.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what a world-class discovery looks like? What is the scale of that?
If you see anywhere from 4, 5, 6 billion pounds of copper, in a project, it's going to get that world scale attention. So $100 billion ore body plus. That's basically gross value, what we're looking for in terms of finding out there.
When you tie into one of these big intercepts, you know that the tons are going to build up, but they're rare and they take a while to get into production. So for us, success would be big, long intercepts of consistent copper gold mineralization. That's what we're looking for right now. And obviously the bigger the better, because that's what the major mining companies want, and it's what the world needs. The world needs copper.
What's the plan here once you do find that asset that really is going to make an impact on a global scale?
The kind of success you're asking about, obviously, is what is going to have an economic impact of note that's going to really put the company on the map. And that would be when we're drilling. And that's why we're rapidly moving our assets towards drilling. And then, of course, the result you look for when you're drilling is a large intersection of consistent copper mineralization.
So if we can find a global scale copper project, we won't even have a chance. It's going to be shareholders' choice. I mean, if the share price performs, but we won't have a chance to actually build it because of how much of a shortage is going on right now with copper. There's a very, very competitive environment amongst governments, amongst major mining companies to find these type of discoveries. So I think that, having sold our last company after we drilled 100 holes, I think that would be a very similar reaction I would anticipate here if we find something big enough. And the model is to find something big enough that's an easy decision for our shareholders to make. The reward is big enough and that's it.
So we've touched on the macro, we've touched on how you guys are going to execute. Is there anything that we haven't touched on?
I think timing is the one thing you haven't really dug deep enough in. And there's a lot of urgency in our minds as people running this business because we are starting to see a lot of things come out of the first project and we're so close on a pipeline. We always know more than our shareholders do, and our business plan is at that stage of starting to get very active. And you can see it in our chart; it's just starting to perform. So I think the timing has to be isolated and respected. It's at that starting point.
You bring up a really good point about timing. How quickly does a stock like yours usually reprice once you get those positive drilling results? Is it on the release?
So you're going to get 3 phases. The first phase is going to be the lead up to drilling results. That's going to start in the next week or so. And the second phase is going to be additional projects. So these are 2 repricing events within the next 30 to 60 days. That should be quite significant. And then the drilling, which will likely happen around third quarter of this year, or fourth quarter, September, October at the latest. That's going to be when the lottery ticket starts, where you could go up 10, 20 times. So by the end of this year, we would have tested the first of a few projects that could deliver that lottery type of return for shareholders. We've done this twice before, very successfully for many shareholders. This is about as good as anyone could put it together, what we've done here in Torque at the forefront of the biggest copper bull run that we'll see in our lifetimes. The first project is in, the second, third, and fourth projects are coming, and they're all going to be substantial and get global attention when we go drill them.
We've hit the ground running. Just recently, you're hearing people talk about copper, but we've been focused on it for a year and a half now, getting ready. So I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve, and we're looking forward to making that first big discovery.